Hello and welcome to the Pagan Portal Podcast, produced by Moonbooks Publishing and presented by me, Rachel Patterson. If you prefer an audio-only version, do please hop on over to Spotify. If you are watching on YouTube, please consider hitting the subscribe button or even joining as a member for sneak previews of all of our goodies. So today, it was with absolute pleasure that I welcome word witch, folklorist and yoga expert. So get bending. Katie Ness, welcome.
Thank you for having me. I wouldn't call myself an expert, but I do have a bit of a passion for many things.
Do you want to start by telling us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so my name is Katie and I'm a hereditary hedge witch. I work a lot with dreams and folk magic and the liminal realms, ancestors, and even grief and death. That's quite a recent one for me. I'm also an initiated Magdalene priestess. I was initiated in 2017. And that basically opened me up to the path of walking with the goddess and the divine feminine. And I've been a practicing yogini since my early 20s. And I became a yoga teacher in 2019. In my own personal practice, it's very Shakti Bhaktiism. So again, devotion to the goddess. So that's pretty much my spiritual path. Academic, I'm an artist. I did a BA Honours in Fine Art many years ago. And I'm always dabbling, always dreaming, always creating things, from writing to painting to talismans, dream catchers, hand fasting cords, all kinds of different things. And I'm currently preparing for my MA so that I can fully certify as a historian / folklorist. And that's pretty much it.
That's very impressive. Incredibly impressive. Now, yoga does seem to form a strong part of who you are. I have dabbled a little bit. How did you find yoga and what does it mean to you?
Most people tend to come to yoga through a yoga class, and that's totally fine. And they learn about the asanas and meditation. I came to it in a different way. So I'm a huge book nerd. So I must have been it was on my spiritual journey, actually. So I came from a Catholic background and I loved that so much. And it connects me to my grandmother. I started looking into books on like Wicca and paganism and spirit beings and reincarnation and karma. And that's where my first path to yoga came from, was that those books, and started to question the meaning of life and went into a deep dive in my late teens and all kinds of philosophies and mystical theories. When I was in my 20s, at uni, I started taking classes, but I didn't fully immerse myself into the path of yoga until later on in Plymouth. I lived in Plymouth and this wonderful woman ran a yoga studio, and I would go twice weekly. And that's when my practice started getting better. I will say now I'm not flexible anymore. Like, the yogic path is always changing. It's very similar to the path for any other spiritual path. So like, I went through a few years of really trying to get my splits and my cartwheel. Like, look, I was that yogi not that long ago. And then in 2018, my life changed. A lot of it crumbled, and a bit like the Tower cards in the tarot deck. And it made me question my life even more. So I took a women's retreat in Ibiza in 2018, which was all steeped in Vedanta and puja ceremonies and working with Hindu goddesses, specifically Lakshmi. And then finally, 2019, I went traveling and became a yoga teacher and did another women's retreat all about Vedanta and Durga and other goddesses. Today, my practice is very slow and quiet. I kind of sit and meditate and listen to kirtan and chant in Sanskrit, and that's pretty much my practice as a Bhakti yogini. Yes.
It sounds beautiful. It sounds relaxing and to escape. It sounds beautiful. Yes, I'll have some of that. Thank you. Now, you mentioned history and folklore. Fantastic to be studying it. What was the inspiration for that, beginning of that journey?
Lockdown. And
the famous answer to lots of things.
Yes. The catalyst for that was 2018 when I left my old life behind. And I spent a few years questioning who I am and what I want and what kind of career path I want. Originally, I wanted to be an art therapist, and now I've moved away from that. And so during lockdown and also around that time, I survived an ectopic pregnancy. So, I'm recovering and I don't really know what to do with my life. I can't sit up to paint. I can't do anything. So I started reading and really channeling that inner world, who am I really and what do I really want? Because, going through a near death, it really makes you question things.
Yeah, imagine.
Yes, yeah. And so I thought, well, I've always actually been really witchy, and I was bullied for it at school. I was called witchy at school, and I think people have seen things in me that maybe I didn't want to acknowledge within myself. I just thought, well, how can I turn that into a career path? What can I do? And I think I've always loved history and learning about material culture that has shamanistic and magical properties or intent. And I love folk stories, folklore, folk art and customs. And, I think that's an innate human drive to have these practices. And I want to understand why, and I want to know all of them. So I thought, and even in yoga philosophy, there is so much folklore and magic in that topic, which not a lot of people know. So yeah, that's why I think I want to go down that road and be like a female version of Ronald Hutton.
You need to get waistcoats. Now, you have a book coming out, Word Witchery. It's fabulous. But what is a word witch?
Gosh, what a question. I think a word witch is a term often used in creative and spiritual context. It describes someone who's deeply connected to language, using that language to heal, protect, or create blessings, or as an act of transformation. And they tend to be storytellers, poets, bards, and you see that throughout history, writers, journalists, funerary rituals, and, it's there all the time. And so their craft is a form of magic. And it's all about channeling that energy and intention through their words. But I think actually all of us can do it. And all of us kind of are a little bit of a word witch. You think about how when it's somebody's birthday and we chant happy birthday as an act of celebrating somebody's life and wishing them well throughout the years and hoping that, they attain abundance and happiness and love and all those things. That's a wish, that's a spell. And then also there's so many other ways that we do that. Like when people sneeze and we say bless you, we're basically, a spell wishing that they are going to be well.
And that they haven't got the plague.
Yes, exactly. That's where it comes from, right? So
nice wish.
But on a deeper level, especially for those who do see themselves as word witches, it's just about imbuing intention into your words, and it's all about creating that energy through your voice or through your writing. And it's aiming to create change and meaning through their wordy output. Well, it's a form of channeling, I think, and it taps into some kind of liminal space that even I can't comprehend and explain.
Words have power, don't they? Words do have power. Mm-hmm. So do you believe there's a connection between words and magic?
I'd say so. Because I think if you think about in the Vedas, for example, it talks about utterance and then the act of creation through working with Saraswati in the form of Vat. She is the ultimate consciousness of words made manifest and intellect. And so when we utter and when we speak, whether that's in our mind or in our hearts or actually vocalizing things, it creates a kind of intention. And then you think about, that experiment with plants. I don't know if you've ever heard of that. School kids were asked, there was 2 plants and they were fed the same way. They got the same sunlight. And then they had kids say good things to this plant and bad things to this plant. And obviously, lo and behold, it showed that this plant wasn't doing very well and it was wilting. So there's definitely power to words. And I think I always say, be careful what you say, be careful what you wish for. And because you just don't know if what you're saying about yourself or to somebody else, whether that's going to harm them internally or heal them. So I think words do have power. And we all of us have a tendency when we see comments that are negative, we focus only on that one negative comment rather than all the positive comments. And it really, really, really affects us. Or we'll have like a group of friends saying beautiful things and reminding us of our worth. But all it's going to take is somebody to say something hurtful, like you've got a big nose or you're this. And it can really deplete somebody's confidence in themselves. So I think, words absolutely do hold some kind of power and resonance that can deeply affect us and our world.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely power behind it all. Is there a history and an evidence of history of word magic?
Yes, it's a lot. And I have a list of my favorites forms of word magic. So just bear with me. I'm going to get my list up. I love it so much, this topic. And the book that's coming out, I knew that there was only a certain amount of like word counts. But I couldn't fit everything in. And then after I submitted everything, so much new information was coming to me. And I was like, that could have gone in the book. So these are my favorites. The first one is called the Sikelos, which is an inscription. And it's dated between the 1st and 2nd AD. And it's a funerary ritualistic poem. It's inscribed on a tombstone. And it's Hellenistic Ionian and recorded with notation. So it's to be accompanied with a musical instrument, usually a lyre harp. And it was common practice in that time to perform sacred poems with instruments, particularly lyre. And I'm actually learning how to perform this poem with a company in Greece called Lutherios, one of my many hobbies. Another poem that I really love, it's an epic poem incantation. It's actually quite famous, The Exaltation of Inanna, written by the Sumerian high priestess and head duenna, written and performed around 2300 BCE to petition the goddess, who, as we all know, is the ancestor of Aphrodite. Oh, this is a really good one. The oldest love poem in the world, entitled Bridegroom Spend the Night in Our House Till Dawn, is by an anonymous female poet from ancient Sumeria, and the tablet was unearthed at a place called Nippur in where modern Iraq would be. And inscribed in the cuneiform in the tablet is both erotic and magical in nature. So it suggests it was meant to be a love charm to seduce her lover. Like, goodness, like there's such a beautiful, like old, like ancient poem. So it just goes to show that we're no different to our ancestors. We do exactly the same things. And I find that so beautiful. Another one, which is a favorite, a dear friend of mine actually performs it, and her name is Bettina Joy de Guzman. She performs the hymn spell to Hathor, and so it gives you an idea of what that sounds like, and you can actually find it on YouTube. But I will recite the translation for you. It's Hathor, Lady of the West, you of the starboard side, Lady of the sacred land, eye of Ra in his forehead, beautiful of the face in the bark of millions of years, seat of rest of the doer of righteousness, ferry boat of the favored ones, whose place it is to provide the great bark to take the righteous across. So I'm guessing that's probably something to do with crossing over and the spirit world. One last favorite that might tickle you. It's written in Cypro-Syllabic, which is, I think, a language that people haven't really deciphered fully yet, but it's a curse written on a clay tablet from Cyprus, and it translates to, may your penis hurt every time you make love.
Well, if you're going to put a curse out there, then make it a good one.
I thought I'd add that in because it's a bit cheeky.
And there I was going to say how beautiful the poetry is. But actually, I guess curses they are a form of poetry as well, aren't they? It's all the power of words, yeah. And lots of people wincing now.
I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. You can cut that out.
No, that's staying in. But kind of thinking of words, is it important to look at the etymology of words? I know I do when I'm trying to work out the history of things or deity or, the meaning of it. Do you think it's important?
I think so. But I, like you, I'm very similar to you. I'm very wordy and I'm very nerdy. So for looking at the etymology of words, just to remember their root meaning over time, because, when new generations come through, sometimes things can get lost in translation or misconstrued. For example, the very famous one, blood is thicker than water. And we know that, we potentially know that it could have meant the blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb, suggesting that, yes, your family is important and you do love them. later in life, you'd create your own circles and friendships, and they're just as important for you throughout life. So I think like knowing the etymology of words is important, and to keep their power and sovereignty, and just to remind us that sometimes things can get forgotten and lost. And like one example is the word spell, and it has a connotation that you think spell, you think witch, and that's nothing. It's not good, it's bad, it's evil. But actually it means to signify, and it comes from the Anglo-French espellier, which itself comes from the Middle High German spellen, which means to release or to talk. In modern English, it came to mean to read slowly, letter by letter. So that's not scary at all. And the same with the word witch. Like, I don't know if you can correct me on this. I don't know if we know the actual origins of witch, but there's a lot of...
I don't think we do we? There's lots of options.
Yeah, but the idea is, from a lot of historians and etymologists, the idea is that it potentially means wise, somebody who's wise of knowledge. And that's not scary either, is it? So like being a witch, being a word witch, being whatever magical practice you have, I think a lot of things, especially in relation to the more mystical and magical world, have been lost and misconstrued and misrepresented. So yeah, etymology of words is very important.
It's also fascinating, though, isn't it? I have lots of light bulb moments when I'm looking up the meanings of, that makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I just recently learned that my name Ness is not just Scottish in origin, it's Pictish. It potentially either means headland or it's named after a river goddess, Nessa. I was like, oh, well.
Right, yes, of course. Yeah, I'll take the second one. Take the goddess one.
Take the goddess one.
Yeah, it is. It's fascinating.
Absolutely.
Definitely.
Do you have any words off the top of your head that you learned that their origin that's quite fascinating?
I always look, if I am researching a book, and particularly if it is a deity name, like Sulis, she's one of my goddesses that I work with. But like we say, that there's very rarely one definitive. There's always, well, it could be this, or it could be that. So Sulis could be I, but it could be gap, but it could be sun. You got to kind of, depending on which language, which part of history, lots of options, lots of variations. So you have to take the one that resonates with you, I think. Sulis she is a goddess of the hot springs. So to me, I and gap both work because that's where the spring water comes out of the ground. But because spring water's hot, then sun also works as well, because that makes her a solar goddess because of the hot waters. So it all kind of fits.
Yeah, it does. That's really fascinating. And I recently learned that the word, there's a lot of people that are a little bit, the word tantra, like tantra is quite taboo, but actually, and they relate it to tantric sex and that whole westernized idea of it.
That stings for, yeah, for anyone of my age, that stings for.
But actually the word is a Sanskrit word and it means to weave. So it's just weaving your ritual, weaving your intention, weaving your words. And they see in Hindu philosophy or yogic philosophy, they see when you chant mantra, you're weaving these. That's why a lot of Sanskrit words, they look like one long line, like it's a weaving, like a tapestry. And I was like, that makes so much sense.
It does. That makes perfect sense. That makes sense in all of its contexts as well, doesn't it? I love Indian chants. I listen to quite a bit of Bollywood, if I'm really honest. I do love particularly the goddess chants that come with the Hindu practices. They're beautiful. So do you think that poets and poetry have a place in modern life? Because do we think of poetry as old or ancient? Is there a place for it in modern life?
Yes, absolutely. Especially right now. A few years ago, it was the poet Rupi Kaur that really brought poetry back to the forefront of society, and with her poetry book Milk and Honey. Even just like where I live in London, there's this amazing shop and cafe called the Poetry Pharmacy, where you can go and get your prescripted poetry medicine, which I think is so sweet. I think poetry gives people a voice, and similarly to like any other art form, I don't think it's going to stop anytime soon. I think it's so innate in us. to find all kinds of different ways to create. And especially if we always want to communicate with each other, and how like language and syllables always change. I just think there's always going to be ways that we're going to be creative with words and poetry. And also, I've just learned that I think it's in LA, there's actually called the Poetry Brothel, which is like a collaboration of like burlesque and poetry, and it's like performance ritualistic poetry with, you know, the sensual. One of my favorite poetry books is a collection of poetry by word witches. That's how they define themselves, and it's called Bell's Occult Poetry of the 21st Century. I think that it's always going to be with us, and I don't really think that it's an ancient practice at all. I do think it ebbs and flows like a lot of creativity. So at the moment, it's very, very popular at the moment. I don't think it's going away anytime soon.
We get very creative as human beings, don't we? Now, I work with deities, you work with deities. Are there any that are specifically connected with word magic?
Yeah, so I've got a list of 3 or 4, and they're all goddesses, interestingly. I can't think of any off the top of my head that are of a different gender, but these are the 4 that I know of, and I'm open to learning more. If there's any more, people can give me a shout, send me a message. Nisibar is a Mesopotamian goddess associated with writing, knowledge, and the grain. And she's one of the oldest Sumerian deities, and she was highly revered by scribes and scholars. And she was classed as the embodiment of the written word. So she would have been, people would have performed and created writing to bring her forth. And then we have the Egyptian goddess Seshat, of writing, wisdom, and knowledge, and often seen as a record keeper, and not just of daily life. She was almost like the 3 fates, because she also was, like, I suppose in a way, the writer of the Akashic records of everybody's life. I don't know too much about her, but I know that she was classed as the mistress of the House of Books, and she was also invoked at times for writing and performing funerary rites and spells.
I like that title, Mistress of the House of Books.
Yes.
I could do that, yeah.
But one goddess that I work with in my yogic practice is Saraswati, goddess of writing. Actually, she's the goddess of many forms of creativity. So like writing, music, art, playwriting, performance, wisdom. And she was revered as the embodiment of the universal intelligence and consciousness. Her name actually means she who possesses flow, or she who flows like water. The idea that inspiration and intellect flows through you. In her aspect as the goddess Vach, she was seen as the mother of the Vedas, which is a sacred text of the Hindu religiosity. And then lastly, we have Minerva, who many of us know of, and she's kind of like the Roman version of Athena. And her name means she who knows, or she who remembers. Apparently, they say that you have to invite her in, otherwise she will take your inspiration and abilities away. So you have to honor her first, honor her knowing. Those are the main 4 that I'm aware of, but I'm open to learning many more because, like you, I love learning about all kinds of different deities from around the world.
I love learning. I love learning anything. Yeah. You never stop learning, do you? You don't. You can't know everything. There's always something new.
No, and life is too short. And I wish I was an oracle that could retain all that information.
Yes, I do wish my memory was better. That would be incredibly helpful. Mind you, it does mean I can read a book, forget it all, and read it again like it was the first time, which is a bit of a bonus.
That is true. Well, I have a really bad habit of highlighting things as well in my books. No. Because my memory is so bad. My long-term memory is excellent. So if we did like this podcast over and over and over again, I'll absolutely remember everything. But when I'm reading a book, my short-term memory is terrible. So I have to
Post-it notes. Post-it notes.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Are modern poets, are they interested in word witchery as the ancient poets were? Or has it changed completely? Is that word witchery not there anymore?
I'm not sure, to be honest. I would say, personally, yes. One of the people that the person that wrote the foreword of my book describes herself as a word witch, and she's a modern Irish poet, and her work is fantastic. And a lot of her poetry actually invites and invokes the goddess Bridget. And I also know a fabulous musician and poet who is very avant-garde and witchy herself, and she also creates poetry and mantra to goddesses. So I still think it's quite prevalent, and I think some modern poets probably don't. I mean, I have quite a few on my bookshelf. There's a poet that when his father passed away, he wrote an entire collection dedicated to contacting the realms of space and the cosmos to channel his father's spirit. So yeah, absolutely. And then you have famous singers and songwriters like Florence Welch and Lana Del Rey, who bring out poetry that has a sort of dreamy, magical vibe to it. So absolutely, I would say so.
Can we put Stevie Nicks in there?
Yeah, exactly. I love Stevie Nicks. She's so witchy.
Definitely storytelling.
Exactly.
So out of all of these poets, ancient, modern, in between, have you got a favourite poet?
I don't have one favourite, but I do have a small list, and I've broken it up into past poets that I love and also contemporary. So
okay,
I love Christina Rossetti's The Goblin Market. Such a magical poem and has a lot of different layers to it. The Conference of the Birds by Farid Undin Attar, which is a ancient Persian poem that's very mystical and philosophical about, I suppose in a way, it's very similar to the Bhagavad Gita in that it makes you question your life choices and who you are and your karma and things like that. I have a bit of an obsession with Persian poetry. They are very good at poetry. It's got a beautiful, romantic, but also magical vibe to it, which is what I really, really love. Then, of course, Sanskrit and Greek poetry, and some of which I'm learning with the lyre harp. Contemporary poets, some of them are not very witchy, but I will mention them here. I love Sarah Kay. She's a performance poet. Emily Berry. She does prose poetry that's very magical. Then there's Lisa Marie Bazil, and she's a very proud Scorpio, and she lets many people know that she's very broody, and she likes the beauty in some of the darkness and the ritualistic side to poetry, and her stuff's absolutely gorgeous and mesmerizing.
I can relate. Scorpio here.
Are you? That's amazing. I love Scorpios. They're so intriguing and complex.
Complicated and high maintenance, I think, is what you're looking for.
No, the Scorpio energy, that constant rebirth, that cycle of that transformation, rising from the ashes. It's just phenomenal, gorgeous energy, and I love it so much. But that's another topic for a different day. There's an Iranian poet who's classed as a contemporary poet, and she sadly passed away in the 70s, but she's classed as the Iranian version of our Sylvia Plath, and she's called Farrokhzad. I hope I said her name right. And then my Cypriot friend introduced me to this poet. His name is Odysseus Elitis, and again, he's a man of letters and poetry that looks at life in a magical lens. So yeah, I would say those are my kinds of favorites: meandering, dreamy, magical poetry.
Perfect. Absolutely perfect. Let's have a look at some of the terms that are in your book. One of those is a weaver priestess. What are weaver priestesses?
So this was something that I learned about when I was first becoming a priestess. I wanted to take a deep dive into the roles of priestessing in ancient times around the world and find as much information I could as possible. And then I stumbled on this book by a brilliant author called Jill Hammer, and she looks into the roles of priestessing and how they would have had, the idea is, and the research says that they would have all had temple duties. They would have also specialized in a particular topic, like the herbalist, the birthing doula, the dream interpreter. She goes on to talk about the weaver priestesses. Now, traditionally, they were the ones that would sing and chant as they were weaving cloth, particularly veils and curtains to, cover up sacred objects or sacred places. They would embroider sigils and good intentions into the cloth as well, very similar to the fabric, African fabric, the kanga, I think it's called, and they have like a little blessing that in part of the pattern. So these weaver priestesses basically were creatrixes that not only physically spun, but they would spin words and stories and poetry as they did their women's work. So in that regard, these priestesses were like similar to the Norns, I suppose, grandmother spider. So they were wise women who sit at the loom that were chantresses and storytellers and poets. And they would, chant prayers and blessings as they spun. In modern context, within the book that I learned that you can take that word weaving similar to the word, tantra means to weave, whether that's an actual textiles or text. And you can weave poetry with your words. You can weave a song. You can weave a story as you're creating a painting. And so I really, really like that terminology, especially when I learned the etymology of the word text means textile, comes from textiles. So I kind of wanted to include that in the book as a way to weave it all together, I suppose.
This is where it all fits, isn't it? All the bits slotting in together.
Yes, absolutely. It's amazing what you can find when you just keep digging, go down rabbit holes.
Do you think that words themselves are important for working in ritual to bring it together?
I'd say so. Even if you stay silent or you don't particularly write out your word craft, it's still in the mind and it's still working through with your voice on an internal level. My teacher on my yoga teacher training taught the difference between chanting outward and then chanting inwards. So when you chant inwards to yourself, it's called Ayu Yog. So even when you say the word yog, it sounds like it's going in. But when you say yoga, it's coming out, it's projecting out. So in many traditions, words are seen as conduit for energy and capable of influencing you and the surrounding environment and manifesting desired outcomes. So I would say absolutely, especially when you repeat what you say, when you're creating a ritual ceremony, you often find, regardless of whether it's in a Western context or in another part of the world, you come together, whether in a coven or by yourself, and you chant the same thing and it becomes ritualistic and meaningful. And it's almost like a vibration that goes out and comes back like a heartbeat. So yeah, absolutely, I would say so. It's really important for rituals.
Power behind it again.
Absolutely, yes.
Thinking about word witchery, subject of the book, how and where would you use word witchery? Some examples.
I would say it's quite an accessible form of creativity and craft, and it's quite freeing. Again, going back to what happened to me with surviving an ectopic pregnancy, I couldn't do anything else. So I had to sit up and how do I process that grief and how do I transform that into something that's meaningful to me? So I wrote poetry on my laptop and I was doing that and then falling asleep. And then, whereas, I think in a lot of ways, a lot of creative outlets, you have to move and you have to set things up. Whereas word witchery is quite liberating and you really don't need much, a pen and paper, your laptop, or even if you prefer, I have a friend who does similar to automatic writing. She does automatic voicing where she speaks into something and see what comes up. And the matter of how is just like, it really depends on the person. And then where can be anywhere. It could be in the comfort of your own home, in the woods. I actually did a very simple word witchery spell when I was abroad once, and I learned that somebody I loved passed away. So I sat on a beach and I got some paper that can decompose quite easily. And I wrote a little spell, a little prayer to wish her well on her next journey. I rolled it up in a shell. And then I just put it on the rocks with a little bit of incense so I could meditate and think about her, and with pebbles and more shells. And I just let the water take it, almost like a telephone line, and hoping that she gets my message to the other side through the water. Yeah, if you've got a notepad and a pen or a laptop, you can take wordcraft, word witchery everywhere with you. It's quite accessible, I think. So it's quite open and inclusive, I think.
So as a tarot reader, I was quite interested on the tarot poetry in your book. Tell us about that.
That was just coming from a playful place. I love picture symbolism, and we all, many of us, love to pull a daily card. And I just thought, what if I could combine the two? So, when we pull a daily card or a spread, we turn that into a ritual in its own right, even if it's just for 5 minutes, meditating on the symbolism and of that card and what comes up. And some people even journal it the way some people journal their dreams. And I thought, well, what if instead of, or as well as journaling, you turned those symbols into a poem as part of your ritual? So it's quite I think I've seen some blogs that talk about it, and I thought, what a fun and cute thing to do to get people into poetry or poetry magic. Again, you've got a tarot deck, it's accessible, piece of paper, and because you've already got that picture symbolism there, it's almost like, when you're trying to do a painting, there's a blank canvas, and that makes it quite difficult, and you can be like, I don't know what I'm going to paint. It's a really good start to give you those symbols and that energy to create a symbolic or magical poem. And it's fun.
That probably helps with learning the cards as well, doesn't it? Because you're connecting with the energies of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for reminding me that. Yeah.
So as witches, you mentioned the word spell earlier. How important do you think the words are important in a spell? Does it make a difference what you say?
I think it doesn't matter exactly what you say, because even I don't get my words right all the time, being dyslexic. And sometimes when I'm learning Sanskrit or maybe like a ancient Greek spell, I'm not always going to get the pronunciation right. I'll try out of respect. It's more like your intention that is infused in those syllables and in that word. They act as a conduit for your intention and focus to shape the magical energy around what you're chanting or saying or performing or even just meditating on. Some traditions do emphasize on the precise wording and pronunciation, but I myself think the intention is the main important thing. And then on a psychological level, words help us make connections and help us to express things. So I go back to the whole, words can be so profound and powerful. Your intention matters the most, because what you say about yourself or others or within your ritual, is it to heal or to harm? What is your intention? And then as a witch, it's be careful what you wish for, or be careful what you say, because it can come back threefold. I think that the intention is more important than the actual word itself.
Do you think it matters if the words are spoken or written? Is there a difference in power, do you think?
I don't think so. I think it really depends on what's best for that person, what they're most comfortable with. If you're quite a quiet person and you just want to internalize that, then you're still speaking, but on an internal level. Or maybe you're connecting, you might be a medium and you're connecting with spirits who are talking with you or anything that comes to you. And some people might be a lot more extroverted and they want to chant and perform their poetry, their ritual, and they might be a leader of a coven. So I think it really depends on what that individual prefers more than anything. It's still the same resonance.
And a question I get asked all the time about spell working, does poetry need to rhyme?
Right. Okay, so my fiance would say yes, because he's all about the rhyming poems. And once we had a debate, because I asked him to read one of my poems, and he was like, "That's not poetry. It's not rhyming." And I was like, "How dare you?" No, I wasn't. I explained to him that there's all kinds of various forms of poetry. I read a book years ago about poetry created from I Ching, and it was almost like a riddle. It was so fascinating. I personally use prose poetry, very similar to the ancient hymns what Enheduanna wrote or what Sappho wrote. But that being said, that's translated into English. They could well rhyme in their own language. And some people prefer rhymes. I added some rhyming poetry in the book that I made. and I'm aware that it was rubbish. That's the whole point, just to say it doesn't have to be great. Here's my examples. They're a little bit crud, but it does the job, and it's accessible. And sometimes reciting and writing poetry that's the fun of it, like writing something that's kind of a little bit rubbish but funny. So no, I don't think poetry has to rhyme at all. It can, if that's what you prefer.
Yeah, no, I'm poetry's not my poetry's on that rubbish line.
I think one of my poems was something like, there was a woman called this, and I was like, oh my God, that's terrible. But it's just to show that, there might be people that read my book and go, oh no, poetry is so daunting, I can't do it. And I'm like, I'm rubbish at rhyming poetry. Don't you worry.
So it is a fantastic book. So I do encourage everybody to buy it. It is fantastic for working magic, for looking at your own practice from a slightly different point of view as well. So are you working on anything new going forward?
I am working on a potential second sample manuscript, but it's the potential sister book to Word Witchery, but that depends on if it's enjoyed and it becomes published. And then there is another potential book that's an introduction to a lesser known deity that not many people know of, that I love very much, but I'm gonna keep that secret for now. That's all I'm gonna say. And it also really depends on if they get born, these are my ideas and I'm researching them. But, sometimes, what my mum says to me, what's meant for you doesn't go past you. So it depends, but I am writing them and I am enjoying writing them.
Good. That's the important part, isn't it?
I have quite a number of hobbies. So I'm learning willow weaving at the moment, and that has folklore and tradition associated as well. Willow is associated with the sacred feminine, which I didn't know, and corn dolly making, because I love folkloric and creepy dolls. So
plenty of that in the corn dolly realm.
Yeah. And then I'm actually preparing for my master's. So like I said, I did a BA Hons in fine art many moons ago, and I'm switching career paths. So I want to create a bridge with some short courses in prep for my master's. So I'm doing some short courses with Oxford University online on prehistoric art and the first artists and their shamanistic, ritualistic creativity. By the end of this year, I'll have completed a short course on the history of folklore, and then another one on medieval society and their concept and beliefs surrounding around magic and alchemy. Yeah, it gives you the cap points that you need to go with your BA to do your MA. Yeah, so that's what I'm mainly doing at the moment.
Fantastic. Yes. Absolutely fascinating, all of it. So thank you very much for joining us today. Please, people, do go and buy Word Witchery. It is brilliant. You need it. You need it in your library. And if you want to hear more from Katie, you've got to buy Word Witchery so that we can get the other books.
Yay! Yeah, because I love writing and researching, and I particularly really love being part of the Moon Books family. Like, it just means so much to me. It's been my North Star through a lot of difficult things in my life. So it's been a beautiful, beautiful journey being with Moon Books.
Good. So thank you for joining us, Katie, and thank you to everyone for watching and listening. And do join us again next time on the Pagan Portal Podcast.
You have been listening to the Pagan Portal Podcast, a Moonbooks Publishing production. For more information, please visit our website.